Hello, I'm Leah De La Paz. I'm a student manager and student DJ here at KUCR. Joining us today in the studio, we have Professor Alex Espinoza and Professor Jennifer Nájera. Professor Alex Espinoza is professor here at UCR of creative writing, and Professor Jennifer Nájera is the associate professor in the ethnic studies department here at UCR as well. Today, we are going to dive into Sacar La Voz, an evening with UCR undocumented alumni activists, happening April 17th at the Cheech, located in downtown Riverside. So for those who are unfamiliar about what this event is, could you guys just talk about what Sacar La Voz is, in general, what the evening will entail with these alumni undocumented activists?
Sure. Shall I start?
Yeah, go for it, Jennifer.
Okay. Well, really, I guess it starts with a book that I just published called Learning to Lead Undocumented Students Mobilizing Education. And that book is based on several years of research that I did with an undocumented student group here at UCR called Poder. And so after many years, I was able to publish this book with Duke University Press. It came out in the fall. And I've been wanting to do a community event that would both entail, me sharing parts of the book, reading from it, but also hearing from the students themselves who are now alumni, living in different parts of the state and the country, and living their full lives. And so, with the very generous support of my colleague here, Professor Espinoza, and from the Tomas Rivera Endowed Chair, we were able to make this event happen.
Wow, that's so exciting. Yeah.
It's a dream. It really is.
Yeah, and, aside from being a professor of creative writing, I'm also a very proud alum of UCR. I did my BA here I graduated in 2000. That was in the dark ages. And to be back at UC Riverside, teaching at my alma mater, and also serving as the Tomas Rivera Endowed Chair, when Jennifer and I talked and I saw her book and what it was about, I instantly reached out to her and said, let's plan an event, because the Tomas Rivera Endowment, which was founded in honor of Tomas Rivera, who was the first Chicano chancellor of the UC system, and our library, of course, is named for him, was established by his wife, Concha Rivera, to honor his enduring legacy and all of his work, being an activist and a scholar of color and a writer and a poet. It just seemed like a natural opportunity to sort of collaborate with Jennifer with Professor Nájera on this topic that's so pressing and necessary in these conversations we really do need to have. So I just kind of felt like, let's do it. Let's put out, just everything. Let's just what's our dream idea for an event, and sort of that was my challenge to Jennifer, was like, just dream big. What do you want to do, and let's do it. And so thankfully, we were able to secure space at the Cheech to host it. The Cheech has been very generous and very supportive. So we're excited about this event.
That's
exciting. And everyone's welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So the origins of the story the origins of this event really come from that story with the book and wanting to move forward and share this with everyone in the community. Yeah.
Well, it's an academic book, and I think my challenge being a professor has been that we write and we're supposed to publish, and we do, but oftentimes the only people who read what we write are other academics or students who are in our classes that we assign our readings to. And so when I was writing this book, I was really trying to think about how it could be a book that was accessible to people both in and outside the university, right? So that it would be something that wasn't boring, that's something that was engaging and really captured, I think, some of the stories that the students would share with me, and then me as an ethnographer or an anthropologist, who was really walking alongside them while they were engaged in these, acts of activism and education during their time at UC Riverside. I was wrapping up this research during the last the first Trump administration, I should say. And so it was hard. You know, it was really hard to be there and experience those things with them. And then it was like the challenge to write about it. And so, you know, now having this book out, it was very important for me that it be something that would be publicly accessible. And what better way, to promote that aspect of it than to have a community event at the Cheech.
Yeah. In light of what's going on in the socio-political world right now, how do you think that this event can relate to that and can kind of shine a light on what's going on in our nation?
That's a great question. Well, there's been pretty rampant anti-immigrant policies that have been, since day one, from the initial executive orders. And it's, I think, created a real culture of anxiety and fear. And I think what we wanted to do here was just to create a space where people could be in community with each other, that we could uplift the stories of these young activists, and just to sort of, have some hope, right? In a moment that feels pretty bleak in terms of immigration policy.
Yeah.
I think it's important to come together now more than ever.
Absolutely.
It's important to create these shared spaces where we can kind of look out and see each other, because I think it's very isolating also when, we're spending our days just watching, all these things happen, and you kind of become almost like desensitized to it.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that these policies and, this rhetoric affects real people. And I think that's what Jennifer's done so wonderfully in her book, is showcased, the fact that all of the stuff that's happening is affecting real individuals.
Yeah.
They're not just statistics or, a story that you hear about on the news. They're actual individuals, living, breathing. And I think Professor Nájera's book shines a light on that at a time when I think we need to remember that these policies are really disrupting actual lives.
Those lives,
Yeah, creating safe spaces in this time, it's more important than ever. Creating a space where we can come together and build up hope in our community. And from what I gather, that's what your book is really doing.
I hope so.
Yeah. So going back and talking more about the book, I want to know more about it. What went behind? I know you said you were doing the research during the first Trump administration, so if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Well, that was kind of when I was finishing it. I started research, I guess it was in the fall of 2013. And, I had just finished my first book, and I was sort of, I had always had students in my classes. I teach in ethnic studies, and I teach Chicano studies around issues of immigration and education and gender. And I've always had students in my classes since I've been here. I've been here for 18 years. Who have come up to me and disclosed their status to me, that they were undocumented, the things that they struggled with. And so I knew that was present in this community of students. And so I started to become familiar with the group Poder, it's a student organization. It was really small. It's historically been a pretty small organization, although it grew for a bit. It seemed to also, during the pandemic, kind of tank in its numbers, and now it's building up again. But I would invite those students, or some of those students, to come and talk to my classes when we would talk about Chicano education, Latinx education, and just thinking about another part of our community and how they're experiencing access. What does it mean for them to be in college, first gen? How is that different from somebody with citizenship? And so, at the point where I was thinking about a new book, I was thinking about something more along the lines of education. And I was at a scholarship banquet, and I was talking to some students who were undocumented, and they were like, "What's your next book going to be?" And I was like, "I don't know. I was thinking maybe writing about undocumented students." And they were like, "That's a great idea." And so I went to the leadership of Poder, and it changes because people graduate and they they move on. And so I wasn't familiar with the young woman who was then the president. And so I met with her, And she says, well, you need to talk to the group. I'm like, yeah, of course. And I actually made a pitch. I got a PowerPoint presentation, and I was like, I would really like to do this project. And
That's great.
Here's what I think, could come of it. And, and I think they took me really seriously. They were, the issue I think that a lot of undocumented folks face is that they are studied a lot. And this was right around the time, maybe like a year after DACA had come out. And so, I think somebody had said, you can't go to a clinic without having like a DACA clinic without having, 7 people want to fill out their research survey about being undocumented. And I was like, well, that's not the kind of research I do. I'm an anthropologist, and the way that I was trained was really more about being accountable to the communities where we research. And so for me, like I had in mind, I wanted to look at the kind of activism that students were doing that wasn't necessarily protest, but like educational, like know your rights campaigns, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then along the way, I started to realize that the students who had given me permission to, be part of their group and go to their meetings and interview them and all those things, I realized that so much of their stories and their journeys was related to their families and their parents, and they were really resistant to this idea of being called a dreamer, dreamers, because in the words of one of the women that I talked to, it feels like we're throwing our parents under the bus. And so, I wanted to make sure to include in my book the stories of the parents as well. I did not ever talk to the parents. I mean, I did talk to them, but very informally and not as part of the research, because I got to know folks over time. Yeah. And, a lot of families and things like that. But I never interviewed parents, but the students would always talk about the parents. And so I would write about what they would say and how they related to their parents. So the first 3 chapters have to do with students and their parents, right? The things that they learn from their parents, the things they experience with their parents. Maybe the first 2 chapters. And then, kind of moving into what they're learning from each other in their student orgs, because, being undocumented, it's not like there's a rule book for it. And also the policies change so quickly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, they're really helping each other, learning from each other, teaching each other, paying it forward, not just amongst themselves, but like to high school students. They would host events and, talk to parents and tell them, hey, it's okay, they can be safe here. There were ways to pay for it, because at that time, well, still there's no FAFSA for undocumented folks, but at the time there were no state-based aid as well. Like now we have something called the California Dream Act that gives some financial assistance, but at the time when I started, there was nothing. And so, maybe it was just starting. And so there was a long, like, kind of educational, like, people had to educate each other. And I felt like that's activism. Like, that's a way that we advocate and help our community and move us forward, right?
Yeah.
And then it was at the very end that Trump was elected in 2016. And I thought I was done with the research at that point. But I realized that, we were entering another pretty intense moment that I probably should also pay attention to. And so that's at the very end of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Now, why is Sacar La Voz so important to you guys? Besides bringing the book into it, what are we trying to say to the audience?
I'll let you start this one.
What are we trying to say to the audience? I think what I hope that the audience comes away understanding is the scope and the magnitude of Professor Nájera's work in, again, showcasing these, very talented, very committed, young alumni, and understanding that books like these, conversations like these need to happen more. I think that there is a resilience and a courage that these people face that daily, and they continue to still thrive and contribute positively to our society. That they're not criminals or people that don't belong here. They're people that have worked and sacrificed a lot.
Yeah.
My father was an undocumented immigrant for many years before I was born. And my own experience with citizenship is complicated because I was born in Mexico but raised here, and for a long time I was a permanent resident, and then I became a full-fledged American citizen. But now we're seeing that even that process is, being, challenged and talked about by this administration. So I think what I hope that people begin to understand, and I guess what I hope that they learn through this, is that all of these experiences, whether it directly affects you or not, we need to be considerate and compassionate. We shouldn't worry when it's something that is going to affect only us, right? Like, well, I'm not undocumented, therefore I don't have to worry about that. That's not true.
Yeah.
I think we have to stop being so solipsistic when it comes to things like that, and realize that, the experiences that these undocumented people are having in this country are experiences that affect all of us. Right? And I think that, if anything, that's what I would hope that audiences get from this, is that, we need more accounts like this, and we need to, remember that these are people, and that, their experiences and everything that's happening to them has a direct effect on all of our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's perfect. The only thing I think I would add is just, the idea of making sure that we also have a say in what the narrative is about undocumented folks, because so much of what you hear is this sort of criminal and these really negative descriptions, and especially, for folks who aren't familiar with the community, it's important that we are able to tell our own stories, that they are able to tell their own stories. And I think that I think storytelling can be and should be, really, really powerful. And so I'm hoping that there's that element as well. And then also just learning from these young alumni how they have navigated things, and, what they were doing in their communities. Because a lot of them are continuing to, they're not student activists anymore, but they're working in other fields that are also, still advocating for community, undocumented environmental justice, access to higher education, so really understanding that, there are, even within these sort of contexts that are hostile to immigrants, there are still movidas and things that people can do to create space, to create community, and to create change.
Yeah. Yeah, like both of you said, now, like, immigrants are being brought down horribly and being criminalized and being told that they're horrible people when our nation has been built on immigration. And I think this event will really help shine the light on that. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a really nice night.
Yeah. And then also, kind of on the topic of, shining a light on this, how do you guys think that people can show up and show support to these undocumented students?
In general? I think, there's such a range of things, right? Like, you could, anything from, if you're an educator, to put a sign on your door that says immigrants welcome here. If you are, I have on my door, like, I'm an ally, right?
Yeah.
And those sort of signs, I think, make a difference, especially for young people. Certainly people can call their representatives if there are policies that are coming out that they don't like. I think there are ways just also to check in on folks. It doesn't have to be a big gesture. It can also just be like, hey, that was kind of rough, policy that passed yesterday, or decision that just came down. Like, how are you doing? Just, just to show up, I think, personally also can be important. Bigger things like run for office,
that would be amazing.
Change the system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of ways, big and small, that we can show up for the community.
Yeah.
And I also think that, using our, positions as, like, educators, to be activists also in our disciplines, right? And I think that's what Professor Nájera has done so wonderfully, which is why I'm excited about partnering with her on this event, is because, since I landed here at UCR, I've seen Professor Nájera be an activist, work really hard, shine light on issues that directly affect our community. So I think it's important, and Professor Nájera's work and presence on our campus inspires me to, become more active, right? To use my voice and to use my influence and to use my position to advocate and to shed light on these issues that are so relevant to us.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing when one person shares their story. It encourages other people to, share their story, and it just creates a bigger space, a bigger community of coming together and trying to advocate for change, whether it be in, the city or even in our nation, as small and as big, as you said, as well. So,
there's no small act of activism, I think, right? Anything we do is important and necessary. And I would say, like, if anybody's out there and they're trying to figure out how to support, it's use your position, use your influence, and use your power and use your privilege, I think, to really advocate for these people who are part of our community and who have contributed enormously and richly to our very being. They pick our food.
Yeah.
They sit next to us in class.
They sit next to us in class.
Sometimes unbeknownst to us. They're our study partners.
And
there's so many different ways that undocumented folks are in our lives. I was actually just remembering this class that I taught. It was an intro to Chicano studies, and I was teaching an honors discussion section. And there was these two young women who would always show up together, and they were both there's this organization here on campus. It's like pre-health professionals or something like that, and they were both in that organization. And they would always come together. They were in the honors section. They would sit together. I would see them in lecture, and they would sit together. And then I remember one week we were talking about, I always incorporate this into my my teaching, even before I was doing this as a research project, was, talking about undocumented students. And they had a discussion forum, and the students, one of the two was saying something to the effect of, like, I don't think it's fair that undocumented students get a space at UC Riverside if citizens, if citizens are being excluded. And so it kind of ignited this debate on the discussion forum. And I was like, oh, man. And so then the friend reached out to me and emailed me and said, I don't know if I'm going to be in class. I just feel really upset that my peers are debating whether or not I should even be here. And I had no idea that she was undocumented at all, like in no way, shape, or form. I didn't even think she was an immigrant. She looked very Americanized to me, I guess, whatever that is. And so, she came to my office hours, and, we were talking about it, and she was talking specifically about her friend, the one that she was always with. And, she was like, do you think that I should tell her that I'm undocumented? And I was like, I don't know. I can't answer that question for you. I don't know her. This was before DACA. This was before there were any kind of protections.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, it's really, this would really be your decision, kind of knowing who she is and, making that choice for yourself. But, it's a longer story. I won't tell you the whole thing. But I did find that really moving, the idea that you might have a particular political opinion and have an idea about who undocumented people are, and not realizing that it could be literally your best friend who hasn't come out to you yet.
Yeah.
And, or maybe would never, if that were your attitude towards, you're voicing this attitude towards them or about their families and their communities. And so I just thought, wow, like, people don't know. And that's why I think that these, multiple representations, multiple stories being shared of experiences and positionalities, I think that's so important to kind of broaden people's understandings of, who they're in community with.
Yeah, you don't know who's around you. You don't know if the person next to you, like you said, is undocumented and is having those same thoughts. So it's important to have these events and your book, sharing the knowledge, and hopefully people will, open their eyes and see that and become more aware and more educated on, hey, this is an issue. I shouldn't be, speaking harshly about it, that I need to learn and do my research and look into things like that. So that is very, very important to know of. Yeah. And then lastly, where can more people find information about the event and about your book as well?
Oh, that's an easy one. UCR has an events page already created for the event, and you can go there, and it has all the information about where, and it'll be at the Cheech. It's next, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, from 6 to 9. We're going to have food. We're going to have books for sale, and just some, again, like really trying to create some community. And you do have to register for tickets. It is free and open to the public, but just so we can have a head count, you do have to register for tickets, and that's through the Cheech's website. But that's all on the UCR event page.
Okay, perfect. And then more about your book.
Oh, the book, yes. So the book is published by Duke University Press, and it is called "Learning to Lead: Undocumented Students Mobilizing Education." I'm the author. My name is Jennifer Nájera, and you can get that on there. It's actually on Amazon as well as their university website, and other. It's basically for sale wherever books are sold.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for coming in today. Had an amazing conversation with you guys. Very educational. And to everybody who's listening and watching, make sure to check out Sacar La Voz, happening April 17th at the Cheech in downtown Riverside. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
Of course.